Hello, welcome once again to Lehto's Law. I'm Steve Lehto, attorney at law in the state of Michigan. Today we're talking about the 6 used car buying myths. 6 used car buying myths. I speak to disgruntled used car shoppers and buyers all the time, and they often start the conversation by saying, Steve, I got ripped off. Here's what happened to me, and I don't understand how the dealership got away with this. And I'll say, well, because there's no law against it. And they say, but that makes no sense. There has to be a law against this. And what they then tell me is a myth. So the myths we're talking about are very, very common. I hear them all the time. Number one, someone will call me up and say, Steve, I bought a used car. It's got a problem. And I can't believe the dealership missed it in their inspection. And I say, what inspection? They say, don't dealers have to inspect cars before they sell them? I say, no. There's no law that requires that. And they say, you're kidding me. Now, there are some states that require cars to pass an inspection. That's different. And if a used car dealer sells a car in that state, it might run afoul of an inspection later on, but there's still no law requiring the dealership itself to do an inspection. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. So you walk up, you're looking at a car on a dealership lot, and you're going, I wonder if this car is safe. I wonder if this car's got problems. You can't assume it passed some sort of inspection because there's no law requiring one. So there's no law that requires an inspection by the dealership. And I'm talking, again, separate from the state inspection. And the key to solving this problem is simply to inspect the car yourself. So either inspect it yourself, bring somebody with you who can inspect the car, or take it out and have it inspected by a mechanic. Okay? Obviously, if you're a mechanic, you can do it yourself. But the point is to inspect it yourself. Don't assume anyone else did an inspection. Even if they say they did an inspection, I would just ignore that, because how do you define inspection? Did they really put it up on a rack? Did they really measure the toe-in of the wheels? I mean, what did they inspect? So you have to inspect the car yourself because there's no law requiring the dealership to inspect the car for you. Number two, a lot of people believe a car must be roadworthy or safe or drivable to be sold. I've had people tell me, they say, hey, Steve, my kid went out and bought a car. I went out and looked at it. The car's not even safe to drive. It's dangerous. It's got some weird problem. The wheel's about to fall off, or the brake pedal goes all the way to the floor, or all kinds of crazy things that are wrong with this car. The car's not safe. They're not allowed to sell unsafe cars, are they? Say car dealerships? Sure, why not? There's no law that says they can't. Okay? And this somehow really messes with people's heads, but there's no law that says they can't sell cars that are unsafe. Now, most used cars in America, especially in Michigan, 99.99999% of them sold by dealers are sold as is. And an as-is disclaimer means the car is coming with no warranty of merchantability. And the warranty of merchantability is that a car is safe and reliable transportation. But if they disclaim that, they're saying it might not be safe, it might not be reliable. And there's nothing you can do about it because you signed the document saying, I acknowledge I'm buying the car as is. So there's no law that says the car is going to be safe or drivable. Now, some people say, wait a second, Steve. Don't the feds have federal safety standards for cars? And I say, yeah, they do, for brand new cars. Brand new cars have got to have airbags, seat belts, certain kind of bumpers and so on. They got to survive certain kind of crash. Brand new cars. But as the cars become used and deteriorate, often they lose much of their safety factors and they might become unsafe or undrivable down the road. And if they suckered you into buying that car somehow, there's no law against that. And quite frankly, again, this is kind of on you, because the same solution to number one is the solution to number two. Before you buy the car, test drive it and see if it's safe or drivable. And if it's both of those things, consider buying it if the price is right. But you can never assume that the car is safe to drive or drivable even, simply because they're selling it to you, because there's no law that requires them to make it safe or drivable. Number three, I get calls once in a while from somebody who says, I bought a car, I paid $15,000 for it, I brought it home, and one of my smart aleck kids pulled out a smartphone and looked it up and said the car's only worth $5,000. I got overcharged by a factor of 3. Car's worth 5, I spent 15 for it. Isn't there a law against charging too much for a car? And I say, well, if you watched a previous episode of mine regarding the how to vote for judges, I mentioned the Consumer Protection Act that used to be on the books in Michigan. It used to be illegal in Michigan to sell a car for a price grossly in excess of the value at the time of the sale. That was true of any product in Michigan being sold by a merchant. But that law got struck down. So there is no law on the books saying that they can't charge an insanely high price. Car's worth $1,000, they sell it to you for $20. No law got broken. Now, you got ripped off, but this is one of those rip-offs that you can't sue somebody over, or you wouldn't win. So if you are in a state that still has an Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practices Act law on the books, there might be a law against charging way too much for a car. But they'll often use language like a price grossly in excess of the value of the goods. Not a price in excess, a price grossly in excess. And the question then is, what's grossly in excess? And I've seen cases out of other states that say, if you merely charge double what the thing is worth, it's not too much. And I've seen cases that say that if you charge 3 times as much, that might be too much. Might be. But there's no bright line on this. But simply overpaying for a car in and of itself does not mean that the dealership broke any laws. And that's what we're here to talk about. I'm a lawyer. We're talking laws. I'm a law-talking guy. So number 3, the price must be fair. It's a myth. Number 4, I have a lot of people call my office, Steve, I bought a car. It's got an open recall on it. It's got an open recall on it. I say, okay, go get the recall taken care of. They say, well, I can't because I looked it up and it turns out that there's a back order in parts, like a Takata airbag or something like that. But the point is, they sold me the car with an open recall. And I say, okay. And, if I want to shorten the phone call, I say, there's no law against that, right? They say, really? I thought it was illegal. It seems like there's something wrong with it, but there's not. At least not legally. No law has been passed on this. And once in a while, I hear people griping about this. But a car that has an open recall on it, this is not a secret. Because when you go to look at the car, you can determine yourself in 30 seconds if it's got an open recall. And I'll tell you right now, I bought a Ford Explorer 02 that was identical to a previous Ford Explorer 02 that I'd owned since brand new. And when I owned the first one, I'd gotten a notice of recall. I took it in and had the recall work done. And they said, we're fixing something to do with the cruise control. So when I bought the second Ford Explorer, before I bought it, I walked around, I inspected it, I test drove it, I got a good price, but then I also ran the VIN, the vehicle identification number, through the NHTSA website on my smartphone. And so the NHTSA website, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration website, nhtsa.gov, I'll put the information down below and across the screen here, nhtsa.gov tracks recalls. And you can type a VIN of any vehicle into the NHTSA website, and it will tell you if there are any open recalls on that vehicle. And if there's recalls that were performed, it'll say, here's the recall, it's been performed. Because the government tracks this stuff. So you can figure this stuff out on your own. So when you're tempted to call an attorney and say, hey, they sold me a car with an open recall, you need to understand the attorney's going to say, why didn't you look it up before you bought the car? And you say, well, I just assumed the car had to be safe to drive, drivable, had been inspected, and all the other myths above. No, none of that's true. And likewise, there's no law that says they've got to do this work for you and tell you about the open recall or even get the recall work done. They don't have to do that. So if they sold you a car with an open recall, that's on you. Likewise, while you're on that website, you might want to look up technical service bulletins, because technical service bulletins will often let you know that a car's got other problems. So for instance, if you're shopping for a car and you saw a Ford of a couple years ago with a dual clutch transmission in it, and you found no open recalls, you'll still find a raft of TSBs regarding the transmission. And I'm not saying you can't buy a car that's got TSBs, but you want to use the TSBs as a hint of what to look at. So when you drive a Ford with a power shift transmission and you're tipped off that, hey, there might be problems with the transmission because of all these technical service bulletins, like 20 or 30 of them, you should pay particular attention to the transmission when you're test driving the vehicle. But no, there's no law against them selling you a used car that has a recall on it, or technical service bulletins for that matter. Number 5, I've had people tell me, they say, Steve, I bought a car, and it turns out everyone I talk to says the car's a piece of junk. Everyone knows that. It's a known problem. This car's got known problems. And they might go back to recalls. They might go back to technical service bulletins. But like, for instance, if you bought a car today that had a Takata airbag in it, number one, you spot that if you ran it through NHTSA, it's going to go, yeah, this car's got a Takata airbag recall, may or may not have been performed. Or if you bought a General Motors product with the key detent problem, you might say, yeah, the car's got a problem which has actually killed people, and no one told me this. And the problem with known problems is, if everyone knows this but you, whose fault is that? So again, You can't assume that they're going to tell you about known problems because, number one, they might not know the same way you don't know. They buy cars at an auction, wash and wax them, put them out the front of the lot and sell them. They don't inspect the cars, like in number one. They don't guarantee the cars drive more safe, as number two. They might be overcharging, as number three. But again, number four, when you're looking up the VINs and the TSBs, you can often find the things that everybody knows are wrong with a particular car. And, I've had people send me an email that says, Steve, quick, can you tell me, are there any known problems with this particular car? And they tell me a make and model of the car. And I say, that's not one that's on my radar because I don't really pay attention to them unless I see repeated problems with the same make, model, and year. And there's a few of those, but I've talked about them on here. But oftentimes, the known problems are on much older cars that have fallen out of the range within which I do lemon law. So I joke, with people, so if someone actually bought a Daewoo Lanos, I said, Steve, no one told me that these cars are all in junkyards now. I'd say, yeah, well, if you poked around a little bit on the internet, you'd have found that out. So again, research this stuff yourself. You've got to do the research before you buy a car. The worst thing in the world is when you are a motivated car buyer. You need to buy a car and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to get a car, otherwise I'm going to lose my job, or I need to get a car to get my kids to the hospital. I need a car, I need a car, I need a car. The worst thing possible. Don't rush the process of buying a car because a lot of people, when they're rushed through this, they're not sure about a lot of this stuff, but they think these myths are true. They think they're protected, but they're not. And so finally, the number 6 myth I got to tell you about is people say, Steve, the salesman told me something and I relied on it. And it turns out it was untrue. Can we sue him? And I said, no, you can't sue him. They say, wait, the salesman lied to me. We can objectively prove he lied to me. Words came out of his mouth that were false. Not opinion stuff. He lied to me. And I say, okay. Do you have witnesses to that? Say, well, no, it's just me and the salesman. I say, okay. Did you sign a purchase agreement? Yeah. Do you have a copy of the purchase agreement? Yeah. Do you have it in front of you? Yeah. I say, look at it and poke around, and somewhere on there you're going to see a sentence or two that says, nothing the salesman said to you is binding unless reduced to writing on this document. Do you see that anywhere? And they say, yeah, how'd you know that was there? I say, it's always there. And the integration clause on a purchase agreement with a used car dealer almost always contains the statement that says, things said to you, verbally, spoken to you by the salesperson, are not legally binding on the dealership unless they're reduced to writing here. So when the salesman tells you, and I've said this so many times that I shouldn't have to repeat it again, but I will. If the salesman says anything to you of import, something you find important, that you're going to rely upon in making the purchase agreement decision, you need to say, can you please put that on this piece of paper? I want you to write that down for me. If you tell me it's a one-owner vehicle, I want you to put it on the piece of paper. You're telling me that it had a brand new engine put in it by the previous owner, I want you to put that on a piece of paper. You are guaranteeing me that the engine will be good, whatever statement the guy says to you, the gal says to you, whatever statement they say to you verbally, if you actually want to see how meaningful that statement is, ask, would you please put that on the purchase agreement? They'll actually say, no, we can't do that. We're not allowed to write on the purchase agreement. You're not allowed to write on the purchase agreement. Isn't it your document? Why can't you write on your own document? Oh, I'm sorry. That means you're lying, okay? So you cannot rely on stuff the salesman says to you 99 times out of 100, if not more than that. So those are the six used car buying myths. Number 1, dealers must inspect a car. No. Number 2, cars must be roadworthy or safe to be sold. No. Number 3, price must be fair. Number 4, cannot sell a car with open recalls on it. No, not true. Number 5, can't sell cars with known problems. It's not true either. And number 6, you can count on what the salesman says to you at the time of the sale. Verbal statements, not true. And as noted before, much of this can be resolved if you slow the process down, do the research yourself, and if you've got questions, ask them before you sign documents, and don't ask the salesperson, ask somebody you know and trust, because a clearer head might prevail, and you might realize that you almost got taken because you cannot believe those 6 used car buying myths. Questions or comments, as always, shoot them my way to the information underneath. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.